Hi, Justin. It's so good to see you today. Thank you for joining us on the Everyday Mystic.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here too, and I'm slightly bummed that we live in the same town and we can't do this like face to face together because
Mhm.
that's always so special to be actually in a room. But I get to see you on the regular, so that's okay. But here in this type of conversation, I don't ever get to be with people during the podcast recording. It's always, people that live all off in these far flung places. But you and I live in the same place, but
Mhm.
here we are virtually connecting today. But to talk about your spiritual path, your path as a everyday mystic, and if you've anyone tuning in that hasn't listened to this podcast before, or this is a new concept to you, I named this podcast The Everyday Mystic because I believe that's what we all are, that we all have not only the capability, but that it is who we are to connect to our own divine nature, that we are the divine. And the way that we figure that out, remember that, connect back to that are so many different paths. There are countless ways, both ancient and modern, that are guiding people back to that knowing. So that's what the Everyday Mystic is all about. And Justin and I met recently here in the town that I moved to fairly recently. And he has a beautiful set of practices. And just in our short amount of conversations, I know that he's also walked the path and is walking the path, which is really what this is all about. So we're going to hear from you, Justin, today. Why don't we start with just like, how did the path open up for you? Because most of us, and I will just preface this, and this might not be your story, but most of us, didn't grow up with this kind of mystical lineage in our family that, we were guided this way by our matriarch and our patriarch, and they were, running us through ceremonies when we were younger. So
Mhm.
it's something that, we came to
Came to
typically on our
typically.
own, right? In our adulthood. So, what's the story for you? How did you come to find this path?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here and good to drop in a conversation. And although we see each other frequently, I feel like we haven't fully dropped in. So I'm excited to fully drop in and get
Totally.
to know each other. And yeah, so I often speak about this concept, and I practice meditation on a daily basis. And then I think over the last couple of years, my practicing meditation has shifted from practicing meditation to being being the meditation, like all day long throughout the day, and just being in tune with the world as much as possible. And whenever I'm in tune with the world as much as possible, that is a practice of mindfulness, presence, awareness. And through that, um, you can open up to the mysticism of the world. So whenever I heard of your podcast, I was intrigued. I find that I am an everyday mystic, as is everyone, but I don't think that everyone has that connection to that awareness of being an everyday mystic. I definitely do. I'm rocking some like incense right now. I've set the
I can
setting and
see, I
scene.
can see the beautiful
Yeah,
plume of
wanted,
smoke
yeah.
coming up.
Um, and it's not just for the podcast. Like this is something that I've learned and incorporated into my life as a way to again enrich my connection to the present moment. Um, so I discovered Wim Hof and Wim Hof method. If those For those who don't know Wim Hof, it's WIMHOF. He's the Netherlands bearded man who has been dubbed the Iceman, and he does the cold exposure. He hikes Everest in shorts and no shirt and mittens. He's like swam through Arctic uh, lakes and rivers, and he, I would say, is a spiritual mentor of mine through the fact that he acknowledges cold exposure as a way that we can connect to our primitive nature. you get into a cold body of water, your body will react. Your thinking brain, psychology really doesn't have any space anymore to like to-do list and all these things and stressors of life that are floating around your head constantly. When you subject yourself to a cold water, that goes out the window. You prioritize self, you prioritize moment, you prioritize survival, and you go into this very primitive state. And so for the last 8 years, I've been doing the ice bath daily, probably 90% of the days, but every day into a cold bath, into cold water outside. Here in the Ozarks, we have a ton of natural springs, which is a gift. So I'll do a lot of cold spring dips as a form of my practice. Cold showers even works. So Wim Hof and the Wim Hof method, when I discovered it 8 years ago, put a lot of pieces together for me. It made a lot of sense, and it brought me into connection with myself. My current business is called True Self Health. So True Self, I found like the majority of my life, I hadn't been my truest version of self through childhood adverse events and other things and ways in which my upbringing guided me. As soon as I connected to my breath, so Wim Hof, the other portion of the Wim Hof method is breathing, connecting to your breath, deep hyperventilation. And through that deep hyperventilation, you create this physiological shift and physiological self-hypnosis, hypnosis. And in that, you almost blow off all the deterrents that keep you from that connection of self. So I wasn't aware how much I was not being in my truth and in my center until I found these practices that connected me right to that. And so now I can't go back. I don't want to go back to that unconscious, uninspired, non-engaged part of me that I lived in for so long, and with good reason and compassion and understanding. But yes, so that's part of my journey, and I can drop into a little bit more of the why of the little other stuff too.
Yeah, well, tell me, like, what was it the 7, 8, however many years ago that you discovered Wim and these methods? Like, what was it that drew you to that in the first place? Did you feel the sense of lack or longing, or that something wasn't right in your life?
Mm-hmm.
What was driving you?
Yeah, there was a string of events that got to the point where I was open and receptive. There's an individual named Paul Chek. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm
sweet.
very familiar.
Um, is there an echo? I'm just checking on audio. Good.
Oh, yeah, all good. Yeah, it sounds fine on my side.
Okay, great. You're a little fluttery, but I think that's on my end. Um, we'll just keep rocking and rolling. All right. Let me know if that gets disrupted at any point in time.
Okay.
So Paul Chek is someone that I find to be extremely engaging. I would claim him to be one of my teachers, my spiritual teachers as well. And I recall having heard about him, listening to him, and not being really connected to him. And then maybe 2 years later, I heard him and I was like, who is this guy? And it was the same guy that I had heard 2 years prior. But at that time in my life, I wasn't fully open and receptive. So it took me some like deepening within myself to be open and receptive and understand and be able to like really hear Paul Chek and be like, whoa, I'm understanding what he's saying. He speaks at this kind of high level of spirituality. And so I think Wim Hof came at the right time for me, the perfect time for me. And as soon as I heard him speak, he speaks with this enthusiasm and excitement for life. And I have a very strong bullshit detector. Like if someone's like, "Hey everyone, I'm super happy," and I'm like, "I don't really believe that. Like you don't like that. That's bullshit." This guy, I heard, and he was just so excited and so authentic, and I was like, "He's not bullshitting. This guy is truly connected and truly high on life and truly excited to wake up every day and live. And so as soon as I heard him, it was like I was fully in. But there were steps that led to my openness and receptivity to listen to him. I went to a meditation. I grew up in Fayetteville, where the University of Arkansas is, and there just so happens to be a connection between one of the professors at the University of Arkansas and some Tibetan Buddhist monks. So I recall when I was 15, my mom was like, "Oh, there are these Buddhist monks doing a meditation. We should go." I was like, all right, whatever. I haven't done meditation. I hadn't really heard of it. I went, and it was a 30-minute open eyes drawn down towards the ground meditation. And it was almost the first time that I had felt this peace and calm and visualizing myself as the mountain. And so that was a moment of awareness for me that sparked more interest in the practices. Yet I was only 15. I was still a shithead. I was still an athlete, focused on sports, and it kind of like went out my window. But a few years later, I'm in college, and again, my sister sends me a message like, "Oh, check out this study on meditation. It's your brain on meditation, and the brain's not super lit up. Your brain not on meditation, and the brain's kind of like not lit up. Your brain on meditation, and you could see that like the fMRI was showing these portions of the deeper center of the brain like activated." I'm like, oh, that seems like something that you want your brain to be able to do, is turn on these deeper parts. And I'm like, so that intrigued me. So there are these little moments of like planting the seed of the practices of meditation being something that I would be interested in. And then a few years later, got into yoga and found that to be positive. And then Wim Hof, and I was like, boom, all in. So that was the path of like openness. But in that same time frame, I was depressed, I was sad, I was confused. I had a stepfather that I did not like at all, and I was partying to avoid inner pain and inner conflict and sadness. So even earlier, I was 6 years old, and my dad passed away in a car accident. So that was it. 6 years old. Actually, 2 days ago, this is 28th anniversary of his passing. And so I was 6 years old. Great family dynamic. I have 4 siblings. So it's my mom, my dad, and 4 kids. My little brother was 1 month old, 2 months old. And so my dad like said goodnight to us and went on his trip. And then in the morning, family members were crying at our house, and there was this whole scene of just confusion. And as a 6-year-old, it's just like, what the hell is happening? Hero gone. What? Yeah. So that's whenever everything shifted for me in my awareness. And as a 6-year-old, that's a very, I feel like, ripe time to experience such a trauma and then really not be able to understand it, and then have anger and confusion and grief and questioning of God. From that point forward, God didn't exist, because why would God exist if something so bad could happen? So claimed atheism at 6 years old. No way. No way. No way. And that also took away like any like faith or connection to life and spirit. And so in that claiming of agnostic belief, or a lack of belief or no belief, came a lot of anxiety and fear and nothing to hold on to and stress. And so and at the same time, very, very positive practices from my mom, and a strong family dynamic, and very strong community support that supported our family in those moments. And so I recognized too the importance of community and the importance of connection, and understood the way in which our body holds emotions and connects to emotions. I was reading my night books were grief books instead of nighttime stories.
Yeah.
And my mom said at one point, she's like, there's one point a couple like weeks or months after he passed away when you're like she's reading us a bedtime story on grief and death. And I was like, Mom, can we read something other than like this kind of book? And so she shares that, and she's like, oh, I guess we don't have to talk about this all the time. But so that continued.
Yeah.
So that was that moment where I went from just being a kid, to a kid, ooh, seeing the world in a completely different way, and obviously shifted my trajectory of life. So
Mm-hmm.
that is my story. That
Yeah.
is the intro of my story, part of my story, um, and grateful to share it. And I'm also grateful to share it from a place now that I can share it, because for years, anytime I'd see a friend with their dad, I'd cry. Anytime I saw Lion King, we watched Lion King as the class movie
Yeah.
in third grade, like 2 years after it happened, and the scene where like Mufasa dies was just like
Mm.
I started crying, and
Yeah.
kids are looking, like, what's happening, and I had to leave, So I couldn't even say the word father or dad without breaking down until I was like 24, and I was just like, fuck, like.
Mm.
Like, what do I do? I need to be able to talk about this. And so that almost shifted my understanding of grief and understanding of suppressed emotions. And so, having gone through that over the last many years, grateful to be able to share it in a way that the grief and pain comes with a sense of understanding and appreciation, versus grief and pain coming with confusion and anxiety and stress. So I am very grateful for this podcast and the opportunity to share that, and also grateful for the work that I've done to be able to speak in a way that it like feels good and connects for me. So yes, thank you.
What was I guess, aside from what you've shared already, what were some of the things that helped you actually tap into where you were holding the, even the idea of dad? Because that had obviously been suppressed to the point of where we can't talk about this, I can't feel this. So, what
Yeah.
helped you excavate that?
It was just many, many like layers of journey. Again, my dad was a psychiatrist, and so we were well equipped with ways in which to navigate with pains and emotions, and made books. And a lot of my father's colleagues like took us kids in as like clients as therapy. So I was in therapy from a young age, and
Yeah.
so I think that helped me understand that emotions are in the body, and to feel them is not a bad thing. And yet at the same time, I I didn't want to go to therapy. I just wanted to like be a kid.
You want to be
Um,
normal. Yeah.
yeah, I want to be normal, right?
Yeah.
And so going back to like the peaks and valleys, it was definitely in the moments where I was just over drinking as a high school partier, like to be really cool, but really to like avoid feelings, that led to me realizing how much I was disguising pain and hurt. And it showed up through me losing a connection to my physical body, getting out of shape. This is into college, just partying all the time, drinking, and noticing and looking at myself in the mirror and being like, who is this? Who is this? But like, that's not me. And
Mm.
so, um, again, it was just a few moments of like recognizing, fuck, this isn't me. I need,
Mhm.
I need to do something different, because I almost foresaw if my life continued this way, I wouldn't have a satisfactory future. So it was a connection to my shadows that led to the awareness of stepping up and going deeper. And Wim Hof method, boom, out of nowhere, ice is your friend. It creates like life. And Wim Hof had lost his wife to suicide, and that's what spurred his interest in cold exposure. And by doing ice baths and cold exposure, it's a natural antidepressant. It's a
Mhm.
natural mood enhancer. It's a natural dopamine enricher, serotonin regulator. So my serotonin was probably way off. I was depressed and sad. So getting into the cold, doing these deep hyperventilation practices, really did wonders to physiologically shift my body, neurologically shift my brain, and then through that open up this window of opportunity to move forward. And my deepest hole was probably when I was like 22 in college, 21, not doing great in school, maybe on the verge of flunking out. Um, Intellectually, likely I'm not a student that should not pass class. I just wasn't going to class and smoking weed every day.
Mhm.
And I was depressed and I didn't want to leave my room. Um, and so that was where I had a moment with my mom. She's like, "Hey, let's try some antidepressants." So I got onto Zoloft. I didn't like it. I didn't want it. It made my stomach hurt. The side effects were shitty. But my paranoia went away. I started feeling a little bit more openness. I felt like I was in a hole, and the Zoloft gave me a ladder, and
Mm.
so I used that for about 5 months, and then I was like, this makes my. I feel shitty. I feel better. I don't want this, so I just weaned myself off, cut it out, and
Yep.
that I think was a necessary component to my restructuring of self.
Mhm.
So, like I said, there's no
Lo-
one thing. It's just
Yeah.
a huge combination of things that have got me to the point where I am now.
Well, thank God you had a mother and a family and a community who knew how to support you and
Yeah.
were doing that. That's so beautiful to hear. And what a gift to you to help you through, help all of you. I mean, you were all grieving, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for all of you to go through that together, but have tools and have resources. It's just beautiful to hear. And
Yeah.
when it comes to pharmaceuticals, it sounds like you did it in the right way, which I think is how they're supposed to be used, these short term, right? Short term use. And then, hopefully you don't need them anymore or you move past. And I believe a lot of them were designed to be that way, to just be used in this short term fashion. And unfortunately, we've got this epidemic of people, right? Just it becomes their daily vitamin. It becomes, part of their daily routine rather than an emergency, situation where it, like you said, it gave you that emergency ladder. Be like, here, okay, climb out. Now that you're out, you're good to go. Like, let's move on, move, into life in with different tools. So obviously breath work and meditation and cold exposure has been an incredible set of tools. Um, and I love that you shared about, the genesis for Wim and how that also came from death and grief too.
Mm.
Because most of us who have found the light, have come back to ourselves, our true selves, were brought to the lowest depths before we were initiated into, this path.
Mm-hmm.
And Wim certainly being, this person who has tapped into these supernormal abilities through these practices is no different. Right. So, for you, when you started these practices, you started coming out of your own hole, when you started to feel whole again, and you were feeling more like yourself again, um,
Mm-hmm.
did you find God again or kind of come back to a faith that you had lost at 6 years old?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Great. Yeah. Great question. And I'm clinging on to the super normal statement of
Oh,
Wim Hof,
yeah.
and he was seen as super normal. Like Wim Hof is different. He's unique in the sense that he can do these feats of cold and whatnot for a long and extended period of time because he is super natural. And what has been proven is there is no uniqueness to him. We all have that capacity. And that's why I teach. So just some background on me. I teach breath work. I teach the Wim Hof method. I teach cold exposure. That's part of my practice. I'm a physical therapist now, so I work with the body. But then I've recognized how much the mind component is as important as the body. They're one and the same. They should be seen in one. There's a physical body, then there's the emotional body, then there's the spiritual body. And how can we use the three together and communicate and understand how they all do exist and coexist, and one is not superior. So that belief that we aren't, it's only unique to Wim, is quickly being dwindled through the thousands and thousands and thousands of people jumping onto the Wim Hof fad and getting into that cold and doing like winter swims and polar plunges and understanding how powerful that is for the mental health practice. So I just wanted to like highlight that is like, it's not a unique to one person, not unique to Justin thing. It just requires consistency and engagement and doing something tough and difficult and then feeling the benefit that comes after it. Boom. So there's your dopamine balancing. Wanted to highlight that. What was that question you just asked? Because I liked it.
Oh, well, yeah,
Oh,
then
spirit.
when you started becoming whole again and feeling,
Yeah.
like you're starting to come back to your true self, did you have a reconnection with God, the one that you had
Yep.
lost when your father died? Like, did that come back into your life?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. One moment does stick out significantly. I went to Iceland on a Wim Hof retreat in February 2019, and so it was me and 20 other crazy Wim Hof ice bath humans gathered together in the south of Iceland in February. So it's winter, it's cold, there's blizzards going, and we're like, let's go out into nature. So every morning we walk to a river that was almost all completely covered in ice, but there's this little opening space, and we just jump into the river, do our breath work, and freeze, and then go back and have hot tea and warm up and commune and do breath work together. It's very woo woo. But
Yeah.
it gave me a sense of connection to others. It gave me a sense of connection to nature. I mean, Iceland is as beautiful of a country as you can imagine. It was fascinating seeing a landscape that's covered in snow, yet it's an active volcano or active volcanic island. So it's covered in snow, but there are these mounds of green and steam. And so it's like winter, cold, frozen landscape, and then these like little pockets of greenery and steam. I was just like, wow, it was fascinating. And so through multiple days of deep breathwork practices, deep cold exposure practices, connection, I had a moment at like 2 a.m. where I just woke up and I had like a dream or a connection with my dad in a way that felt so like visceral, but it also like struck me right in the heart. And I was like, fuck, and I started crying. And we're in a bunk room, and I'm like, I don't want to fucking cry in front of everyone, like people up. I'm like, shit, like, but I couldn't help it. It was like probably the biggest like grief bubble that had ever popped in me. And I was just like, fuck. I was like, I have to go outside. I have to go outside. I have to go outside. So I went outside, and it was like probably like 5 degrees and like windy. No, not windy. It was 5 degrees, but completely freaking still. And I just sat outside and just like sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I spoke to my dad, and I just spoke out loud and into the darkness and into the quiet. And I spoke and just like let everything up and out, and just pause. And there's this fucking crazy sound that like came right back at me from the quiet. And it was like a wolf or a animal of some sort. I don't know what it was, but it just like, as soon as I was spoke, and I just went quiet, it like hit me. And I was just like, oh fuck. And I started crying again. And I had more. And I was like, okay, here's more. I'm just, man. And then I started grieving for my family and my siblings who had also lost him, and they have their own grief and suffering, and just all came out, and I got quiet again, same noise again. And it's just like, the fact that the noise only happened twice, and the only times it happened was when I went quiet, I was like, okay, this is fucking weird. And I just like looked up, and it's cloudy. There's this one part in the clouds, opening in the clouds, and there's one star right in the middle of the clouds. And as soon as I looked up, shooting star went through it, and I was just like, ball. I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck? And that was me saying, okay, he's here, spirit's here. It was the most amazing, profound spiritual experience of my life. And from that point forward, I'm just like, okay, I believe. I got you. Yep, I will trust and listen. There's some undeniable like reality of that experience that hit me in such a way that I think it was from prior to that moment, agnostic. After that moment, like believe in all of it. Universe, spirit, connection, interconnectivity. So that was the big moment for me.
Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible to have your both your father show up, voice of even God or that source consciousness be enveloping you in that moment. I can picture you so much in that scene of where you could say, oh, you're so alone. You're like outside sitting here by yourself, but you weren't. You were completely embraced by the oneness in that moment. And as we are in all moments, but I can really see it so clearly in that moment for you. And it's beautiful, beautiful gift.
Yeah.
So now that you've had that experience, when you meditate, is it different than when you did prior to that? Like, do you have a different type of connection within your own meditation or even in your own practices?
Do you mind repeating that question? I kind of lost you for a second.
Yeah, it's okay. I know there's a echo, huh, from your end. It's just strange. I don't know what it is because we both have echo cancellation on.
Is it
Yeah.
still happen? Is it still happening, or is it like I'm mute?
Well,
I'm going to mute myself while you're talking.
okay. Well, let me speak. I was going to say if I speak and we can hear if we can hear me through your mic. But yeah, if you want to just do that, that works too. So the question is that, as you reconnected and I would say surrendered to God and to source and to the universe and the mystery of all that is, what did that do for your own practices and your own deepening of connection to either that oneness and self? Was it immediate? Like as soon as you had that experience, you were like dropped in a different way? Or did you need to kind of convince yourself that, okay, this exists. I'm going to work on reconnecting to it.
After that moment, let's see. Many things changed. It's like once you see something, you can't unsee it. So for me, I'd seen something and experienced something that was so profound that I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't untouch it. But I also knew that I wanted to embrace it and hold it, and I needed to uh, create structure around that experience in a way that supported me in continuing that. And at this time, I had a daily meditation practice, a daily Wim Hof practice, breathwork practice. But it was on that last day, and this is just one example of the practices I do on a daily basis. It was on the last day when we're just sitting post breath work and in our little peace bliss bubble, and the facilitator of the retreat was a guy named Casper Vandermeulen, great human. So Casper was walking us through this portion of the practice where we were just like recapping the whole week and like just recall the beginning and this and that and everything. And so he was like, maybe put your hand on your heart or something. And I did this. And then I was like, I do this a lot. And I don't want to mix up this experience with like this. Like, I'm like, I want
Mhm.
to hold it and embody it. And I'm like, and as I was listening, I was just like, something about this trip really opened up this third eye chakra center for me. And so I just found myself connecting my hand and my heart to my hand and my head, which is a mudra. So I started to just naturally found this mudra hand position that held and encompassed that weak experience. And so as we were going through this practice, I just like held this pose and really brought the experience into my body, into a posture, into my physiology. And so even now to this day, I can drop into this pose, take a deep breath, and it's fascinating the swirl of memories that just come up out of nowhere. It's almost like I can see and smell the kitchen where we had some amazing food and dining. It's like it's like this is my Iceland posture where I remember the shooting star vividly. I remember jumping into a frozen lake, and it's just so that surprised me
Mm.
how effective the body could hold the memories. And so I just started doing it every day. And every day I do my yoga practice, and at the end, connecting myself, and then I connect to spirit in Iceland in that trip. And so that practice has expanded for me. Like, this is Iceland, this is my family, like thumbs on collarbones. I have a tattoo for my dad, so this is
Mm.
like a connection to my father. Just putting my hand right there with like a strong fist is like my masculine. There's all I have like 12 of them associated. Like, this is my family, and then this is my sister's wedding,
Mm.
this is my other sister's wedding, this is my other sister's wedding, so there's these ways in which I can like go back to Sayulita, Mexico for my sister's wedding, like through this
Mm.
mudra, feel and just see that whole scene. And so those are some ways in which I found using practices could support the blooming of an experience that was so powerful and profound. And so I think I somewhat answered your question, maybe answered a slightly different question, but happy to answer that
Oh
question.
yeah. Well, no, you're always answering the exact right question that is here to answer. Your mudras, are those something that came through you? I mean, this obviously came through you, and then you realized it was one. Are these Vedic mudras that already existed, or is it something that you were just called to hold
Mm.
yourself in these ways and essentially made up for yourself?
No, they're very much uniquely mine,
Yeah.
very much uniquely mine, very much. So I just made them up, came up with it. It made sense, um, and So, I mean, just to like give an example, whenever I do any meditation, my most common is like hands to heart center, prayer, thank you. This is gratitude for like spirit and the practice and everything. And then I bring it to myself, to my heart, like, because I want to acknowledge myself and showing up. And usually I go here to heart, and then in this heart, I'm also like slightly rounded through my back and posture. And this is a connection to myself and my heart, but also like my hurt heart, the heart
Mm.
that has suffered, the heart that has felt deep pain. And I just feel into that. And then from there, I'll do a little drop. I interlink my arms, and that's where I find my inner strength. It's like going down
Mm.
to the lowest part of my experience, connecting to my arms where I really hold and feel the strength and feel that connectivity. And from here, sometimes I'll do a little connection to my dad, but it's that
Mhm.
like interconnectedness of life. And then from this interconnectedness, I change my spine posture to come upright and really hold and embody my true self. And I'm like, I'm connected. I am that. And then I come to my heart where it's like I'm acknowledging my greatest potential of self and connecting to my heart, and my chin's up, and I feel this empowerment and connection. And then from there, I'm like, okay, now I can actually finish and complete with spirit. So it's hands here, here, arms, back to my heart, uplifted, and then here.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating how that just came naturally through me. And so I know there's ancient arts and practices of mudras, but I call this my modern mudra. I
Yeah.
just tap into myself, and it feels natural and intuitive. So
Mhm.
very grateful to share. And I've shared it with a lot of people, and I've encouraged people to find their own. Like when I
Yeah.
work, I do a lot of work one-on-one, health coaching, life coaching, spiritual coaching. Um, Never really advertised as spiritual coaching, but what happens whenever an individual releases stress, gets into their body, moves their breath, gets into cold water, there's a natural rise of spirit and connection. And in
Mhm.
that, I invite mudras, and I'm like, what are you feeling right now? But like, how would you encompass that? And
Mhm.
you never know. You brain doesn't know, but your body's so inept and intuitive. And so people will be like, this is my pose right here. I'm like, great, hold that. Really, the next 5 days, 5 times a day, five by
Mhm.
five. Just do it for 5 minutes. Just hold it and remember this lesson, to embody this lesson. And
Mhm.
then naturally, people are like, I'll see someone like 8 months later, and they're like, yo, check it out. And I'm like, "What?" They're like, I got this. Making
Yeah.
like, I can just get there. They're like, whoa, I can get there so quickly in this. And so it's
Yeah.
spurred by that. So those are my modern mudras. Um,
I love it so much because I'm of the mindset too that I mean we can learn and glean so much from ancient practices and traditions, but that
mhm.
traditions when they become too rigid are not necessarily useful for us. We can find ourselves in our own intuitive body by listening, like you said, and then creating and doing what we're called to do. Um, I think it's beautiful to share that message on this podcast because as we talk about being an everyday mystic, our own connection to the divine without the gatekeepers is what I like to say because so much of spirituality is behind a certain set of you've got to do these rituals in order to reach God. You've got to do this very specific thing and pray, chant, etc. in these specific ways in order to have a connection to God. And you're like, well, if I am the divine, why do I need to do all of these things? And those things I think were very much were means to an end and they showed true for certain people and certain sets of people like, oh, this is working, okay, now everybody has to do this, it works for everyone. And then then there's this person's like, it's not working for me. And that's not because they're not doing it right, it's because we are all very unique. And I think then we've lost within a lot of these practices the ability to truly listen to ourselves and be connected to our own divinity. And so in order to be connected to our own divinity, we it's a must that we listen to ourselves, create our own practices, do what feels right, and that, follow our own with the guidance of, some tried and true principles and some people who've already walked the walk and have been there, done that. Like we can learn from that. Absolutely. But the adaptation is what I think is really important because the adaptation allows it to get fully embodied in ourselves and to be fully our own thing. So I love that you teach that and guide people in that way. If there's one thing that whatever's on your heart currently or whatever you want to leave people with today, what's one message that you would give to people to kind of help bolster that personal empowerment, that means to really truly connect to their own uh, their own path, their own unique way.
I'll try to summarize into just one, but actually, I won't even try to summarize into one because I've got 5 things that are popping up. First, I think about a quote I heard through one of my mentors. He says, psychology is just misunderstood physiology. right? So our body, our physiology influences our thinking. And so many of these practices we're speaking about are very body based. And so for me, if you're feeling disconnected to self, to the world, to spirit, start to move the body, move the body, move the body, run, go for a run, go for a walk, but like exercise, sweat, like get your physical body, because your body is the cathedral. Like Jordan Peterson's, I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. He's another spiritual influencer of mine, regardless of all the polarity of him. But the way in which he looks at spirit and spirituality, I connect with deeply. And he talks about the reason why we build huge, beautiful cathedrals and churches is, as humans, where else can we encompass the beauty of God and spirit? It's like we can't. Like the only thing we can do to really connect and hold that is build the most beautiful and magnificent open space. Like there's no other space that can hold spirit in such a beautiful and profound way. And then you bring that into yourself, and it's like, okay, I'm not supernatural. I'm in good shape. I put in work. I exercise. I put work in. And whenever I put work in, guess what? My mitochondria function better. My breath and oxygen efficiency improves. And this is my physical therapist brain coming in. And so whenever my body's in tune, my circulation is more in tune, and I have less stagnant energy in my body. And whenever I have that more free flowing fluidity of blood, I'm also having a free flow of chi or life force energy through my body. So there's that emotional, energetic connection. So a healthy physical frame, self cathedral, that is the epiphysis of connection beyond. And so we want to be in good physical health to connect to our body. And the other one that comes to mind too is psychedelics. And I'm interested in psychedelics, and I've practiced with plant medicines over like the last 4 years specifically. And that is a profound way in which we can get out of our head and into our body and in touch with our heart. And yet psychedelics work, in my mind, better on a body that has been prepared and worked on itself and has that flow of energy and fluidity. And then also, psychedelics are sometimes the waking up point for people. It's like if you need a waking up, that will wake you up. It'll be like, hey, like, come on, like, step up. There's this sense of responsibility that can come through the messaging of psychedelics. They're also illegal, and then you want to have a guide for those, and you want to be very in tune. So I'm just going to cushion that. But yeah, those are two things, and I'll just say the one thing is physical form, physical body, connection to self, and being in good cardiovascular and physiological efficiency, which leads connection to the spirit.
Mm, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people think of spirituality as either meditating or praying, but essentially it's almost like ascension away from the body, right? They think it's this connection to spirit and God and all the shit out here, instead of dropping fully into the body and the embodiment side of spirituality. Because you can do the other. You can absolutely leave your body, and have a spiritual connection. However, I think as you do, that is pulling our spirit out of our body rather than allowing it like to fully feel the wholeness of us, because we are spirit, physical, mental, emotional, right? We're all those things. But if we pull our spirit out to like in a practice that isn't embodied, then you're not feeling our wholeness. So I love that you practice spirituality through the body, and at least, or um, you are integrating it in, and it's crucial to it. It sounds like
Crucial. And I love your recapsulation of that. And it's I'd say it's like an intuitive human truth. Deep down that when you are engaged in your body and you're in your body, that's like the most present you can get. That's my form of everyday mindfulness, is presence to self, presence to reality of the world. I'm constantly scanning the environment, taking in color, breathing in the world, breathing in the air around me, taking in the smells. This is for me spirituality. It's being in the moment, in the body, in nature, all and how it all just moves and flows together. So that's my everyday mysticism there.
Mm,
Mm,
beautiful.
beautiful.
Justin, I'm going
Just
to
a minute.
share all
Yeah.
your links and whatever it is you want to share with the community in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your story and your vulnerability in that and all your beautiful practices. I can't wait for people to connect to you further. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Mm.
Yeah.